A continuación, en Poder 97.1, tu hora informativa. Entrevistas e información para nuestra comunidad. Y ahora con ustedes, Ida Pérez.
Buenos días, mi gente de Rochester, y bienvenido a su hora informativa. Mi nombre es Ida Pérez y para mí es un verdadero placer poder estar con ustedes en esta mañana. Su hora informativa es un programa que les trae información importante que esperamos que los inspire a una mejor calidad de vida para usted y su familia. Cubrimos información sobre los campos de salud, educación, empleo, vivienda y muchos otros temas más que nos afectan como persona y como pueblo. Su hora informativa está aquí todos los sábados de 10 a 11 de la mañana y nos alegramos muchísimo de que estén con nosotros aquí en el día de hoy. I was just saying that I'm very happy that people are joining us today, and I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, to tell us where you're originally from and how long have you been here in Rochester.
Oh, sure, yeah. So, hi, everybody. First of all, thanks for letting me on here.
Of course.
Excited to talk to you and talk to your listeners. My name is Mike Bolger. I grew up in Rochester, New York. Actually, graduate of School of the Arts.
Okay.
And moved away, lived a few different places, but came back home where I've been working for Common Ground Health for about a decade almost, specifically with the Healthy Kids Coalition.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking about that. Mike, where were your family originally from?
So my mom and dad were both born in New York City.
Okay.
My dad moved around a bunch, and they met in Buffalo, actually, in college.
Okay.
And after college, stayed in Buffalo and then moved to Rochester, I believe in the late 70s.
Okay.
And then I was born in the 80s.
Okay. And what about their family, like where their family was originally from?
So I've got a mixed background, pretty
That's what I want to get to.
Classic, no, sure.
Centuries ago.
Yeah, classic, American European mixing pot sort of story.
Yeah.
My dad's side of the family came to the United States in the late 19th century, early 20th century, and settled in northern New York, a place called Lake Luzerne, where there was a paper mill. So it was English, Irish, and German families coming basically to work in this paper mill, which was the first paper mill in the United States, I think. And then, small town, they, got married and that was my dad's side of the family. Eventually, my grandfather, his father, was the first of that family to go to college. He went down to New York City, studied education, and had a really successful career in higher education, working in colleges and stuff like that.
Nice.
And then my mom's side of the family, Ashkenazi Jewish, so Eastern Europe. Came in the early 20th century to escape, the climate there, which was not very welcoming for Jewish people.
Yeah.
And so came to New York City, lived in Brooklyn and Queens. My grandfather's father, I believe, ran a candy shop for a little while. So, corner store, bodega type immigrant story.
Yeah.
And then my grandfather, in the early 20th century, it was like the Depression and then World War II. He joined the Army as, an option and eventually studied to become a lawyer and worked for the Army Corps of Engineers as a lawyer.
Wow, pretty cool. Yeah. That's a cool history.
Yeah, it's very diverse, There's a lot of different cultures. I grew up in a household that, had a lot of different identities. We celebrated multiple holidays. So I, as a kid, got, the best of a lot of different worlds.
Yeah,
it
cool,
was fun.
Cool. Yeah. And I always like to ask that question because, people often think that we're very different, but we're not, right? Like everyone has come here finding, right, looking for a better opportunity. Some people come for education, some people come for work, some people come following love, right? And so I always like to ask that question just to kind of, see where people come from and what their background is, but also to kind of make that connection that, we've all come here for the same reasons, right? Whether it was, centuries ago and whether it's today. We're all here for the same reasons. So we're going to be talking a little bit about healthy kids, but I really want to talk more about, start with common ground, because some people may know what that is and some people may not. So can you tell us a little bit about common ground and what is it that you guys do there?
Sure. So it's somewhat of a small organization that does a lot of big things.
Right. Exactly. That's the way I feel about you guys.
So Common Ground Health is a regional health planning organization. And what that means is we look at health outcomes in the region. We use a lot of incredible health data databases, so information about hospitalizations, insurance rates, and different medical conditions and outcomes. And then we can use that data. We have an incredible team of research and analyst folks who can work with that data and identify regional health trends. So how are we doing? How are people in Rochester doing versus how are people doing in the greater county region? And identifying different things that are going on, sort of tracking how health is going. And then what we also do is we then use that data to meet with community members, to meet with the people who are the people behind that data, and important decision makers, whether they work for the hospital system or local government or community organizations, and co-create solutions to those regional health inequities so that everybody in our region has an opportunity to, enjoy good health and live their life in a meaningful, fun, fulfilling, healthy way. So we have a lot of different things that we do within that, but if I had to sum it up, is we use this incredible data to tell stories, to identify health outcomes and health inequities in our region, and then we work with community and partners to improve those health outcomes.
I remember several reports that have come out of that organization, that kind of really shed a light on some of the health disparities that especially African Americans and Latinos go through. We wouldn't have that data had it not been for the work that you guys do, which really helps, has helped in a lot of different ways. And I also remember, everything that happened with COVID and, the disparities there, right? And how, some action needed to be taken into place. And I know this particular radio station played a big part in bringing information to the Latino community, because one of the things we discovered was that, people were watching the news, but they were watching the news from their country, whether it was Venezuela, Mexico, or Puerto Rico, but not necessarily the news from our own backyard. And so, it was important to be able to bring that information to the community. I also remember a presentation that was done at the Cancer Community Gilda's Club. There was a presentation that was presented there by the CEO, and it was on cancer. And one of the things that he mentioned was, the amount of Latino and African Americans that it's not a high rate of people with cancer, but we do have a high rate of people that die of cancer. And part of it is because people don't go for the screenings. They may not have a primary doctor, those type of things, right, that may cause us to. So it was always interesting. Whenever you guys put out a report, it's always interesting, the information that you're able to gather and how you're able to educate our community. So I appreciate the work that you guys do there. It's so important.
It is, absolutely. And those reports are on our website, commongroundhealth.org, the Unheard report, which is on Latino health. And we have a number of other reports. And I think what you touched on is a really amazing aspect of the work that's done at Common Ground Health. Our data team, our research team, they get those numbers, right? The data for, hospitalizations and cancer rates, but then they don't just look at those numbers. They go out and have conversations in communities to really understand why, why those health outcomes are the way they are, why those
Right.
inequities are there, and identifying things like lack of access to screening that is in a trusted space, or has language access
Yes.
and things like that. And so really digging into the why
Yeah.
of the data
Yeah.
so that we can get to what can we do.
Yeah, and I think the other important thing that has come out of those reports is who's the messenger, right? Who's sharing this information with the community? Because a lot of times it's a matter of that, right? I mean, you may come and share something with someone and they'll be like, whatever. But I come and share that and they're like, oh, yes, I remember Ida said that, or, I'm just saying. But, the messenger is really important. And I think that that's something else that your organization has made it a point to say we have to have the right people out here sharing this information so that people can get it and follow through with it.
Absolutely. Like we talk about that every day. It's the trusted messenger. That's what
Yes.
we call it.
Yes.
You're not joking, and I take no offense. If I walk into
It's the truth. It's the facts.
Yeah. Well, I consider myself pretty trustworthy,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I'm able to communicate with people,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
nothing beats, your barber telling you,
Yes,
your friend from church,
Exactly,
your
yeah.
friend
Your neighbor,
from school, your
yeah,
neighbor,
yeah.
Somebody that you trust that,
Yeah.
speaks your language. That is where people get their information. That's where they feel
Yes.
comfortable. That's what resonates with them. That's what they remember and trust. And, we don't want to just have these lessons that we learn, this information, and have it not reach people. We want to think about what's the best way to communicate it.
Right. And that's why we have you here today. Because, we want to be able to take this message, to our community. And we have a variety of listeners, but obviously the majority are Latinos, and I feel that we always need to be sharing this type of information with them. So we're going to be talking about healthy kids. So tell us about that, because I know you guys are launching something new. I know that there's been some advertisement here or more than advertisement, it's more public information here on our radio station. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So the Healthy Kids Coalition is it's an initiative of Common Ground Health. So Common Ground Health does all this work on all these different types of health issues. The Healthy Kids Coalition was started in 2009, and it was to focus specifically on, at that time, childhood obesity. Since that time, we've sort of broadened our perspective of child health to focus on whole child health. So that's the physical health of kids still, yes, absolutely, but also the social and emotional health of kids.
Which is so important.
Absolutely. So the Healthy Kids Coalition focuses on whole child health for kids birth through 8. And we do that by forming a coalition. So we have our staff, that is staff of Common Ground Health, that is the Healthy Kids team. And we work with a community-led coalition. So we have over 60 active coalition members, and they represent partner nonprofits, government, folks from the school district. But really, really importantly, we have over 25 parent leaders. And so those are folks who are not there for their job.
Right.
They're there because they're parents or community members and they care about kids.
Right.
And that is, really important. We spoke earlier about trusted voices and things like that. These are people from different neighborhoods, different schools.
Yeah.
They have different perspectives, on the ground expertise of what's going on for kids in their neighborhood, what's going on for kids in this school. And so by pairing that expertise with the expertise from, city government and, organizations like ours, we can really look at finding solutions and ideas for addressing barriers for kids. And I can talk about the different areas that we work in as well. So when we talk about whole child health, the way that we like to organize our work at the Healthy Kids Coalition is thinking about infant and early childhood mental health. And so that's like focusing on building good relationships with babies. It's so important for their neurological development.
For their brain development,
So we do a lot of work in that sphere. We do a lot of work in what we call our equitable communities space. And so that's focusing on what's going on in kids' neighborhoods. Do they have safe places to play? Do they have access to physical activity? Do they have playful spaces that encourage them to be kids and have a, that childhood that we all know that kids need? And then we have work on healthy learning environments. And that's our work that focuses on what's going on in schools and early childhood learning centers and things like that.
Yeah.
And so we do a lot of work around, nutrition policies and physical activity in classrooms and working with RCSD to develop a good wellness policy so that kids have access to things that support not just their academic growth, but also their physical and social and emotional growth.
I want to go back to the beginning of Healthy Kids because you said it was on child obesity. What started that? Like, what were you guys seeing that you said, okay, we need to address this and see how we can make things different for children?
So that predates my time at Healthy Kids. So I, don't have firsthand knowledge, but at that time in the United States, it was like the Michelle Obama era. There was this rising awareness of how food impacts health. Yeah. And also the way that we eat in the United States, it encourages a lot of calories a lot of junk food, and there were rising rates of childhood obesity. People were starting to notice that a lot of kids were gaining weight and having weight-related health issues, much more so than in decades prior. And so there was a national movement to try to address this and look at what kids were eating and the messages that they were getting around nutrition, and try to work to set them up with good healthy habits and a good start in life. And so there was a lot of momentum in that space. It was a pressing issue at the time, and the Healthy Kids Coalition was formed to look at like the policies and the built environment, like the spaces where kids were, and think about what kind of changes there could encourage healthy eating to address the obesity epidemic.
Yeah, I've always struggled with my weight. It's something that as a child, and thinking back, I know that a lot of it had to do with my parents, especially my father. My father actually came here in the early 50s because of lack of food and work in Puerto Rico. And so, he would tell us many stories about how he would go hungry, how there wasn't always enough to eat at home, that he would fill his belly up with, fruit and mangoes and stuff that he would find, out and about in his where he lived. And when he came here, and was able to provide us with food, we were not allowed to leave the table unless we ate everything that was on our plate. And they also taught us to overeat. And I know that, thinking back, he was doing what he thought was best for us. But I also know that he made us learn to overeat, and I teach a CDA class, and I remind my students that the kid's tummy is as big as their fists, right? And that a lot of times what we feed them is a whole lot more food than what they need. It's just a half a cup or a fourth a cup. The most you're going to serve a kid is a half a cup of something, right? But we tend to give them more because, in my dad's mind was, okay, I went through hunger. I don't want my kids to go through hunger. But then without realizing it, he was making us overeat. However, we did spend a lot of time outside. Like we played like all day outside. Like we ran, we played kickball, hopscotch, tag, whatever. We spent our day. But that has changed so much, right? Like you said, most kids don't have a safe place to play anymore. There might be other things happening in their neighborhood. And then our eating habits has changed. We eat a lot of processed food. There's a lot of poison that I feel that we're putting into our bodies. And so kids not being mobile and then also eating a lot of processed food, I know is the cause of a lot of the obesity. And we still, it may not be as, I think we're more conscious now. I think parents do try to add more fruit and vegetables to kids' diets. I wish we could do better with the foods even in places like a school or centers, where we're able to give kids more fresh fruits and vegetables and things of that nature. But it is something that that I talk to my students often, because I said, you really can make a difference, with these kids. And even at the center at Ibero, one of the things that we couple of policies that we put in, one was no sugar. Like we don't do anything sugary. We did that a couple years ago. We had some help with the Heart Association, and they kind of helped us create a policy and some things about, a physical movement for children and for staff, as well as, so we have a no candy policy. So in Halloween, Easter just passed, like we don't give any candy out on those days. And then we also had to present it to parents and say, hey, for a kid's birthday, instead of bringing cupcakes and punch, can you bring a fruit salad or maybe a vegetable tray or maybe some arts and crafts instead of, and parents really appreciated that. Yeah, healthy celebrations, because, our kids are so close in age that you can have 5 birthdays in a week. So imagine 5 parents bringing cupcakes and when we presented it that way and kind of showed them this is what a table would look like if you had 5 kids in your classroom that had birthdays. This is all the junk that these kids are going to be
eating. It's
no
longer a treat.
It's
every day.
Right, exactly. And so, and when you give them that visual, right? When we gave them that visual, because we actually had a table full of, all these cupcakes and candy bags and all these different things. And they were like, wow, we never thought about it that way. So, they're really good. And so we also gave them a list, these are the things that you can bring, or these are the activities that you can do. And parents have adopted very well to that. Obviously, I don't know if other people have something like that with a no candy policy, but we had to put that in place because we were like, okay, if we really want to help these kids, right? And we can't control what they could do at home, but we definitely can control what we give them here.
Creating that safe space.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so we have a whole policy on it. We also have a policy for staff. So the same thing applies for staff. And it's been well received. But we had to educate parents on that. And I think the visual of all these cupcakes and candy bags and things like that on the table really helped them realize, okay, we probably can do something different and something better. We've had people that have brought someone dressed like Dora the Explorer, and they kind of did a dance in the big atrium, or someone brought a magician, someone, did a whole arts and craft with their child's birthday was like in Christmas time. So they did antlers and, they had like little, I don't know, it was something with celery and cream cheese or something. I don't know, something that they made that was really cool related to the child's theme, with the Christmas. And it was really cool. So parents can be creative in that way. They just got to be given the information of, look, this is really harming your kids. What alternatives can we have?
Yeah, absolutely. I was really fascinated by your story about your father, because it really, I think, is reflective of like all of humans' experience, right? For so long, human beings struggled to find food, right? Everybody was struggling.
Yeah.
And now with processed food, and especially in this country, there's just tons of food around us, tons of sugary things like that. And our bodies are hardwired to want to eat that and just keep eating it because we don't know when the next meal is coming from, right? Yeah. But when it's just always around, we have a tendency to overeat. And the other thing is we're surrounded by those messages, right?
Yeah.
So you're teaching these incredible healthy habits and helping explain, why we don't want to have cupcakes at every single birthday party, because then every day of the week we're eating cupcakes. But there's all these messages from junk food companies and commercials and all this sort of stuff that are surrounding our kids and offering them these sweet treats and unhealthy processed foods.
Yeah.
And there's research out there that shows also that Latino and African American kids are exposed to more of those junk food advertisements than their white peers. So I think the work that you're describing is incredibly important, because if you weren't doing those types of things and helping explain that to parents, then they're just going to be exposed to the junk food ads. And the junk that's in all the stores and at all the, events and all that sort of stuff. And it just becomes natural to eat an unhealthy diet.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about, I know you talked about the bringing the message, but I know you guys have done some work in neighborhoods as well, of creating, like you said before, the safe spaces for children. So tell us a little bit about that, because I know you and I have worked on a couple of projects right there on North Clinton Avenue as well. So
we're not far from them, right?
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about that, because to me that's fascinating as well.
Yeah, I think what we really try to focus on is getting policies like the ones you talked about in place in places where kids learn and in city policy and things like that. But sometimes you have to show people the change that you want to see.
Yeah.
And so we also do some work to pilot things and demonstrate things. And we do that with community. So the project we did with you was around safe places for kids to walk and bike and access La Marqueta. And we knew that speeding cars and unsafe drivers are a big concern for parents. So how do we make the environment safer for kids? Well, we change the way that the roads are designed. So it's, cars have to slow down, or there's more crosswalks and there's more awareness that people are crossing streets and things like that. So that project we did in partnership with a whole bunch of other organizations, including Reconnect Rochester and City of Rochester, and a landscape architecture firm called Stantec. And we got these traffic engineers and landscape architecture folks from Stantec and community members together. And we said, let's reimagine what North Clinton Avenue looks like. How could we make it safer for people walking and biking? Came up with a fun design and then temporarily put it out on the street using paint and temporary curbs and things like that to show what the street would look like if the city changed the way that it was designed. We've done projects like that all across the city. We've got one coming up in the spring up on Avenue D by the rec center there. So that's very exciting. And so Healthy Kids likes to get out there and demonstrate things. We do days of play. So we had a whole campaign about creating safe places for kids to play in neighborhoods. And we've been working with the school with different schools to promote play in schools. So we have Global School Day of Play. We provide materials and things like that to the different schools.
A nice bag full of stuff.
A nice bag full of stuff. You can't beat it, right? You got to come with gifts. So, we were able to provide some materials for different things like that. And we're sort of thinking of it like we're trying to jumpstart a movement, right? We don't have the resources to, redo everything. We're not the people who get to say what the policy is in a school or in a, in a daycare or in a neighborhood. But we can come with a cool bag of stuff. We can have some fun, eat some food, get some music going, try out some of these healthier celebrations or, changes to the play space, show what it can be like, and do that in partnership with the community members in the school community, and then give them the tools for making it like a regular part.
Absolutely.
of
and I'm it's a good way to plant that seed in their minds of, okay, this is how you can make this better for kids. And then when the opportunity does come when there is some funding, right, and there's some planning of changing, whatever needs to be changed, then those things can be a part of that plan and be included, because I know that's kind of like, I know that here in the El Camino neighborhood, we have a vision plan. And I know that a lot of that stuff is in our vision plan, right? And so when people come and develop, we're going to say, okay, this is our vision plan. Can you look at this? Can you incorporate some of these things into your planning? And I know when we build the International Plaza and then the apartments behind it, one of the things that was put in there as part of that vision plan and as part of what you guys had planted in us was, okay, we need a playground back there. So if you're going to have all these apartments and their family, they're for families, we got to have a safe place for children to be able to play. And so that, that's the importance of your work, right? And people need to know that it may not happen immediately. You, like you say, you may not have the funding to make these things happen. You don't have the power to change policies, but you're planting those seeds. And I think about it all the time. Like when I'm thinking about, my neighborhood or even in my CDA class, like I can't stress enough the importance of physical, activity for children and the importance of physical activity and how even a baby, a newborn baby being able to, the connection in their brain when they're moving their torso, when they're developing the strong muscles in their necks, and how it goes from there, from in to out to the extremities. And, their small motor skills are the last ones to develop and one is dependent of the other. Like people need to know those things, right? Because they want to tell kids, go sit over there and stay still. No, kids need to move. Yeah. They need to move.
Unfortunately for us parents, right?
They need to move. So, if you know that they need to move, you know that it's connected to their brain. Every time they move their arms or their legs, there's direct connection to their brain. Then let's create a safe place where they can do that, right? Yeah. Like we don't want them bouncing off the walls at home, but we got to give them that space.
Right. That's the way that they grow, right? And sometimes they have to bounce off the walls, and we have to,
you just
have
remind
to deal ourselves with that
it's for their good. It's for their good. Yeah. And also what you've done with the city school district, because when cuts come. Physical activity is the first thing to go. Music is the next thing to go, which is another good way for brain connection. So all those things are important, and it's important. I'm glad that you guys are bringing those things up because, kids need their recess. They need recess. They need to be outside.
They sure do. Yeah.
They need to be playing. They need to run. Like it's those things are so important in child development. So I'm kind of glad also that you guys are looking at the whole child, right? And physical development is not just for, the connection in their brain, but also emotionally, right? Emotionally and
it's all interconnected.
It's all interconnected. Like one thing is not separate from the other. It all plays a big part. When you think about kids nowadays, you think about very young kids talking about, I'm depressed, I'm sad, you got to think about, okay, what is this kid doing? Like, does he have enough time to play? Can he be a real kid? Is he moving, right? Is because all of that is connected.
It absolutely is.
And so
nutrition,
I feel like
physical activity, mental health, it's all intertwined.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I know you guys have launched some things specifically around I want to say mental health for infants, right? So tell us a little bit about that, because I know that's an initiative that you guys have today, which I absolutely love. I love like I said, the public information that's being shared here on the radio. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that's our Love from the Start campaign.
Love from the Start.
Yes. And I hope that all your listeners are seeing the ads out there, and I'll do my best to explain it. Full disclosure, my coworker who is really leading the charge there wasn't able to make it today. Was not feeling well.
Yeah.
So I am not the best, most comprehensive source for this, but I will explain it to the best of my ability. So the Love from the Start campaign is about that infant and early childhood mental health. Yeah. And when we say mental health for infants, we don't mean an infant going to a therapist or anything like that. It's what babies really are looking for is that connection.
Yes.
They're looking to their parent or their trusted caregiver for that sort of call and response, right? They want to see that they're being seen. It makes them feel safe. And it's how they learn about the world. They learn about it through that person.
And they learn to trust or untrust that world based on how you respond to that cry, right?
Right, yeah. So this campaign is really just about reminding parents and bringing that to the top of folks' minds. If you're a new parent, any opportunity you have to talk to your child, even if they're just a little baby and they're sitting in the car seat in the back seat, talk to them. Let them hear your voice. I love that time because I could just tell my baby about the world around them, and sort of I was talking to myself in a lot of ways.
But they're listening.
Yeah, they're listening.
They're
And the important
listening.
thing is that they're feeling acknowledged and that they see that you see them.
Yeah.
They're learning from your facial expressions.
Yeah.
They're picking up on your language.
Yes.
And their brain is being soothed by your presence and your attention to them.
Yeah.
And so creating that caring space and that caring interaction at such an early late age is actually really important for the brain development and the cognitive development of the kids.
Yep.
And it has these lasting benefits. It sort of sets the kids on a good path for mental health and cognitive development.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it doesn't seem like much. It seems like you're just, saying, oh, look at the doggy.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
a cute doggy.
Yeah.
But that is actually having an incredible impact. You're feeding your child's, brain and its development.
Yeah.
So
and not just the language development part of it. I again, I teach a CDA class, and what I tell my students is you become a narrator for your children. Like you're explaining everything, right? If you're going to pick them up, to go change the diaper, you say, okay, I'm going to pick you up now because, Miss Ita's going to go and change your diaper and I'm going to lay you down on the mat and I'm going to find your, your wipies and your diapers and I'm going to put my gloves on, and you become a narrator for that child, explaining everything that you're doing. And I tell them often, you might feel uncomfortable or you might find it weird that you're saying all of this to the children, but think about all the words that you're now providing this child, right? And they're making those connections. And I tell them, sometimes people use, for example, profanity, right, in front of a child, and all of a sudden that child uses that word, and you're like, wait a minute, where did he? Well, they're listening to everything in the background, right?
Yeah,
whether it's good or bad.
They understand sooner than they're able to say it.
Exactly,
so
exactly.
They hear you before they're able to talk back.
Absolutely, they hear you before they're able to speak, and so you got to be careful what you say around them. But there's such big connections when you're talking to them. So it's not just, obviously the cognitive, but the communication part of it too, because now you're providing. And I remember I knew this I didn't know this too much when my girls were growing up, but I knew this very well when my granddaughter was growing up. And people would often say, your granddaughter's vocabulary is really, it's really big. And I was like, yeah, because I would talk to her all the time, and I wouldn't talk to her like a baby, and I wouldn't use a baby, and no, I would talk to her like a normal person, and I would explain things to her, and as a result of that, she was, she always had a lot of questions too, right? And so, so I would answer her questions, and so, you'd be surprised that talking to, and it also helps them feel safe. Yeah. The biggest thing with babies is, a baby is depending totally on you when they're born, right? If they cry, you got to figure out, are they crying because they're hungry or they're wet or they're sick or they're tired, right? So you kind of learn those type of cries. You'll even say, oh, no, that's a tired cry. He just needs a nap or whatever, right? Or no, that's a hungry cry, or that's, no, that cry is not
Something's
his
wrong.
usual,
Yeah.
something's wrong here. Yeah. But every time they cry, they're looking for you to respond. And so if you don't do that, then now this baby's going to be now on survival mode. And that's what we don't want. I think, out of everything that you said, what we don't want is for a baby to always feel that they're on survival mode, but yet that they feel protected and cared for and nurtured. And that's part of that.
That survival mode is actually like, they can see that in the brain. They can see the stress levels in the brain, and it creates, like a toxic situation in the brain. And that can damage a kid.
Yes.
And it's they can heal, but they're starting out, in a tough spot.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not just at birth, but even before. You know, there are studies that show if a mom, most moms that are single moms, a lot of times there was stressful. They were under very stressful situations while they were pregnant. That can affect the baby. An absent parent can affect the baby. So those type of things, right, that we have to keep in mind. It's not just when they're born, but even before they're born, the stress that moms feel, babies can feel inside as well.
We call those adverse childhood experiences, right?
Exactly.
And it can be a number of different things, whether it's food insecurity or witnessing violence in their neighborhood or, trauma related to a relationship with a caregiver. And as those pile up, those create more barriers for the child's own mental health and physical development and physical health.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to recognize that that's not the kid's fault. And a lot of the times it's not the parent's fault either. It has to do with the environment that they're growing up in, the policies that are around them, the things that are happening in the world that they can't control, right? And I think one of the things that happens too often is people blame the individual for the outcome without recognizing how society or policies or the environment that the person's living in are contributing to that outcome. And so that's one of the keys to the Healthy Kids Coalition's work is we're trying to address those policies and those environments so that people and kids aren't subjected to as many adverse experiences that are out of their control.
Yeah, I remember. I know you mentioned your coworker Eric earlier, and I know he and I had a brief conversation around a training that we both had at separate times, but we both had the same training around infant mental health, and they talked about the ghost in the nursery room. And when you talk about generations of people doing the same thing, breaking those what I would call generation curses, right? That, if you experience something as a child that that damaged you, that hurt you, what are you going to do different so that doesn't happen to your child, right? And so that's really interesting, and I share. We do a series of workshops with our parents at the Child Care Center, and adverse childhood experience is the one that I start with. And I remember a parent saying, when we talked about, how they communicate with their children, she admitted, I always call them a bad name. She said, I'm going to stop that today. And she said, my mom used to be like that with me. I just realized I want to stop that right now. And so I remember saying to her, well, what are you going to call them? And she said, well, I said, what are you going to call them besides by their name, by their real name? She's like, maybe like son or daughter. I'll use that instead. I'll replace, she would use a series of words, and I don't want to repeat them on the radio station, but she said, instead of saying those things, I'm going to say son or daughter.
Right. Those little choices. Like you're not, it's not you're a bad kid, it's you're making a bad choice, right? That's the type of thing that we're trying to work on.
Exactly. And so, it was really interesting. I mean, all the parents were every time I do that workshop, parents really leave thinking a lot about, what they're doing and what can they do different, right? And knowing their score, right? Knowing their ACEs score, be like, oh my God, I need to stop this. But with that particular parent, like we literally were able to see the difference.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And that was just, if nothing else came out of that, the fact that one parent with 3 kids was going to be a better parent and was going to treat her children with respect, and call them either by their name or son or daughter. To me, I was like, okay,
now they're gonna
my
grow
work
up
is
and be
done.
Like, when mom started calling me son, I knew I was.
Because but it was really interesting how that really, it really made her think about all the bad choices that she was making. And again, it was something that's how she was treated. So that's how she treated her kids. Yeah. She just didn't know any better,
Yeah, we all get good lessons and bad lessons. And that's one of the beautiful things about being a parent is it's an opportunity to sort of make your own, your own parenting style, and we all make mistakes, right?
Yeah.
And we all, get to our wits end.
We're not perfect.
And,
We're humans. Yeah.
Yeah, but just having that awareness that the way that I'm interacting with even my, little baby is important, and the way that I speak to them can have a lasting impact. And so this is an opportunity to do something really positive and help a young person. It's the beauty of parenthood.
Right. And then also generations to come, right? That we break that cycle and, have better outcomes for those that are coming after us. I think that's really important. What else do you want to tell us about this new initiative?
So I would refer people to the campaign on our website, healthykids.org. You can find the Love from the Start links there. And it's going to have so much great information, better than I can communicate. It's really been the work of Anna and Steph and Eric on our team. So, I would encourage folks to recognize those ads and just think about the little things, the little communication, the acknowledgement, the conversation with the littlest ones, even if it doesn't feel like they're talking back. They are signaling you, and they are listening, and they are looking to you for that love from the start.
Yeah. And it could be talking, it could be singing, it could be playing with them. Like, I always tell my students and parents, you are your child's best playmate, right? So play with them, pretend with them, sing with them.
Play is how kids learn. That's how they explore. It's what they're wired to do. Absolutely. So, besides people going to the website, is there some, let's say they go to a website and say, I want to learn more about this. Is there a way for them to be able to do that? Yeah, absolutely. So the website will have links to lots of resources. But as I said earlier, we're a Healthy Kids Coalition. And we really are only able to do the work that we do and have the impact that we have in schools, in neighborhoods, and across the city and the region because we are doing it in partnership with community members and parents. So we're always looking for people to join us and to help us understand what's needed and, help advocate. We like to, work with our parents so that they feel like they can go to City Hall and talk to City Council. They can talk to their school administrator and let them know their concerns and what they think needs to change because that's, parents know best, right?
Yeah,
Family
and
members
parents
know
are powerful.
best. Yes, absolutely.
They're very powerful.
Yeah.
It's really interesting when parents don't know that, how powerful they can be, and then they realize that they are. They just go out there and make a lot of great changes, in wherever they are, whether it's in their neighborhood, whether it's in their school or whatever. But parents are really powerful, and their voices really, can go really far. It's different if you were to go and share something, but when a parent goes, and that's happened to me.
Oh, me too.
As a grandmother, I did go to City Council to talk about, all the needles that we were finding in my neighborhood because, I felt that my grandkids could not come and play safely, whether it was in the winter in the snow or whether it was in the fall in the leaves, or it was in the summer in the grass. Like they just couldn't enjoy the outdoors because we constantly had to worry about how many needles we were going to find in my yard. And I remember going to City Council, and the next thing I know, we're having this huge meeting with all these important people, and I'm just sharing my story about my granddaughter. I just want my granddaughter to come to my house and enjoy my house the same way my daughters enjoyed it when they went to their grandmother's house, which is the house that I'm in, right? Like I want her to have the same memories that my daughters had, but I couldn't. She couldn't because it wasn't safe to be outside, And so, that kind of led to some other things. And so parents and grandparents, or anyone that's really caring for a young child.
Neighbors, community members. That's
everybody has a powerful voice.
Yeah, and those are the most powerful voices too. When you're talking to, elected officials and folks like that, they don't want to hear from the expert, who doesn't live in their district. They want to hear from the people who live there. Yeah. And I think that's a really important message.
And the other important thing is that we as voters, that's our right, to be able to say, hey, this is not, I pay taxes, I vote for you, I want to see something different for me and my children in my neighborhood. And so, that goes really far. Anything else that you want to share that you think listeners should know before we close?
So that is the closing message, is that your voice matters, that there are organizations like ours, our Healthy Kids Coalition and Common Ground Health, and all the work you do, that want to help, that have resources to change policies, to change systems, to promote programs that support kids' health. But it's really the parents that are going to make the difference, and that we're here to help. So folks can go to healthykids.org. They can learn about the work that we're doing and get involved and see us out there in the community and join us in this movement to promote.
And I love the fact that you guys include parents at your table. Like we can't talk about children and families and neighborhoods if those people are not there.
We we don't just include, we have a parent leader table, and we really look to a diverse group of parents from all over the city to let us know what, where we need to be working and what we need to be working on.
So thank you for being with us here today. I like to end the show by asking if there's a phrase or a saying that either you grew up with listening to that still resonates with you, or one that you recently have encountered that resonates with you. So you said when I first grew up, and the first thing that came to mind was I had an older sister, and my family got involved in peace activism and community change and that sort of positive stuff from before I can even remember. And so I had this older sister that I looked up to, and she had a bumper sticker on the wall of her room. And the bumper sticker was a quote from Margaret Mead. And the quote was, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." So that idea that even though, we might be a small community here, we can make a difference and be the change we want to see. Well, thank you for everything that Common Ground Health does for our community. We really appreciate it. And hopefully, when you have another initiative or maybe another new report or something, you guys are welcome to come back and share that with us.
Thank you so much.
So thank you for being with us today. Gracias a todos por acompañarnos en esta mañana. Lo esperamos nuevamente el próximo sábado de 10 a 11 de la mañana en Poder 97.1 FM, la única estación radial latina con dueños y operados por latinos, por la comunidad, para la comunidad. Esto ha sido su hora informativa, trayendo la información importante que nos inspira para una mejor vida. Que pasen una linda semana. Hasta la próxima, mi gente.